Hello, gamers. It's me, Josh. I'm gonna do a pro gamer move. So this right here, it's kind of tiny on OBS, but whatever. If you look at it, it says you will receive new posts automatically. Well, what the fuck does that mean? That's a great question. For no reason whatsoever, in the final week of development before launch, I have decided to introduce a brand new feature which required an entire day of work. Literally, I woke up at about 7 and I was able to test it publicly at about 7 p.m. So I spent literally all day working on this. But it's so good that it was definitely worth the effort. Let me just show you how this works. If I would go here, I have this open on two different tabs. So if I go to here, make a reply, and say, love Terry. Press Control Enter, and boom, there it is. Now you can't see the tab, but the other tab lit up with a 1 and an alert on the icon. So that you know there's a new post. And go here and it says, love Terry. Now, the way that this works is that it doesn't poll anymore. What happens, it uses a new technology that's only come about the web recently, like in the last couple of years, but is already phenomenally popular because it's a huge step forward in how the internet works. I think I can show the F12. I can. So I go to networking. Let me refresh. Okay, so the page loads. You get this. You can go to messages, and you see that it signs in. And these messages are, once it establishes the WebSocket, it's kind of like when you connect to a video game. When you connect to a video game, you're not like polling the server for updates, it's slow as shit, and it depends on the client asking. So before the little countdown, like on 8chan and other sites, you have a little timer that says we're going to do a next update in 1, 2, 4, 5, 8, 10, 42. I think the one on 8chan goes up to like 5 minutes, asking for an update every 5 minutes. So once the timer's up to that speed, if someone's watching that thread, it may be 5 minutes before they see a reply. So the conversation is jank as fuck because people are not going to be sitting there pressing update all the time looking for a response, right? They're going to be doing other stuff. So it's really bad for conversation to do it this way. The way that it works now, though, is if I go back to the other tab and I type in whatever and I press send, it shows up immediately. And I go over here and you can see that I have an alert, a new message. And this alert contains the details of the new reply. And then that new reply gets translated into a post, exactly like how an update from polling the server would be, but it's sent automatically. And this is because the backend is now much more complicated. Unfortunately, setting this up is a lot of work. It's very frustrating to get right the first time. But the way that it works is that you have a supervisor in the backend. The supervisor launches certain processes that it's actually really hard to explain. When you make a post, you insert data into the SQL database. In our case, it's Postgres. And that database is a permanent thing that sits there and can be queried by the server at any time. But the problem is that querying a database is relatively slow in terms of computer stuff. It's a couple milliseconds, but the real slowness comes with templating. When you take that data and turn it into HTML, that process, which is handled by PHP, is slow, and PHP is usually slow. But this is the complexity, is taking that data and translating it into a document. That's the entire question of how do you make a website. That's the purpose. So if you want to skip as much of that as possible, right? So what it does now is I have what's called a NoSQL server. Instead of MySQL or MySQL, you have NoSQL instead. And NoSQL is a hash table, which means that there is, instead of a complex database where you have tables and rows and columns and foreign keys and all this complicated shit for pulling together data, you have a very, very simple key value pair storage called a hash table. So you put something in and it says, my post, board test post 250 equals, and then the HTML for that post, the entire thing. I can, like everything that's in this article element becomes stored in the NoSQL database as board test post 250. So if any application, any part of the application wants the HTML and doesn't need to worry about the actual specific datum in it, it can just pull that from the NoSQL table. And even though Postgres is very fast and handles queries in about a millisecond to a couple milliseconds if it's a complicated query, NoSQL is much faster and handles queries in about a tenth of a millisecond, if that. So huge entire swaths of the page creation time is just completely annihilated when you do it like this. And as an added benefit, the Redis database, the NoSQL database, can be used in more ways than just storing this. You can set it's basically whatever your mind comes up with, whatever patterns your brain comes up with for your application, you can use as a key. So if you want to store information about things that have happened, other applications, Redis is very flexible in that other applications, not just PHP or other full-fledged, backends can query it. Redis is very simple and accessible to any kind of application. So if something happens, like you get a new post, you can put into the Redis database, a new post has happened, and it's this post number. And then if you have other applications that are workers that are always sitting there scanning the Redis database for values like that, then as soon as that post is made, another application can take that value and do something with it. So in this case, there's something called Laravel jobs. So once a post is made, it inserts that key saying that something has happened. And then the Laravel jobs, which are managed by a worker, see that key and pull it immediately within a millisecond. It takes that data and it pulls it because it's constantly querying this NoSQL database for those values. And then once it has it, it does some work to it because there's some stuff that has to change. That, like, if I post, I'll show you. The actual speed for inserting that post is very fast because I've taken a lot of the work that would have to happen, such as recaching all the pages of the index and the catalog, that kind of stuff, and I've moved that to the job. So it happens after the post is sent to the user, indicating that there was a success in sending a message. So that's why it's under half a second now, as opposed to being more than a second, because a lot of that work has been moved to the jobs. But then the jobs get to do something else that's fun. They get to dispatch a broadcast, and that's another key into the Redis database, this time indicating that there is a message to send to anyone plugged in to the WebSocket. So once that fires, what's called the Laravel echo server, which is another process, sees that event, and then generates this and sends it to all the clients who are listening, in this case to thread 609, which is the true ID of this post right here, as opposed to the board ID, because the way that the database works is that you have to have a unique incrementing number. Well, you had different boards, and unless you had a different, if you didn't have this system, incrementing would occur across boards, and that's just unacceptable. Everyone expects boards to have their own numbering system, right? Not just one, not just shared across the site. So there's a real ID, which is the unique per post, and there's a board ID, which is unique per board and ID. So for the sake of simplicity and for the sake of doing as little work as possible, trying to figure out what the post is, the subscription channel is just thread and then the real ID, which isn't of value to the client. The client never, the actual person at the computer never sees the number, the actual post ID. Anyways, that's where it gets sent the information, and then as soon as that information is received, it is translated by the JavaScript into an actual post, and that is why it is so fast. And I was testing this out yesterday, I invited a bunch of people to start posting in this one thread, and without a hitch, no post got missed. It was updating, within about a couple seconds apart, and I've tuned it since, so it's even faster now. And since I've done this, the test board, the board that has, it's just me and like a couple people who know about it, and we're just testing features. The board got like 600 posts in a day because people could actually talk to each other so fluently. It was like a chat room, and that's exactly what you would want from something like this. So in the future, I will incorporate WebSockets into more stuff. When I add a thread watcher, a 4chanx style thread watcher, that will rely heavily on WebSockets. And yeah, it's exciting stuff. It's I think people are gonna like it. There's a lot of issues. I that's why I'm kind of saying I shouldn't have spent the time to build something brand new like this, because there is some stuff that I really should be focusing on right now. Like, board owners can't delete posts. Like, okay, Josh, stop working on new stuff and go back and fix what already should exist and should be working. Yeah, so I'll do that later. Actually, I'll probably do a second development diary today, because I want to do a thing explaining how I do unit testing to automate debugging, and that'll be interesting to talk about. Okay, bye bye.